Hello and welcome, friends. My name's Ryan, the official host of Reddit Voice, and today we're going to be looking at some of the top stories from r/MaliciousCompliance. Before we do, though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest videos. You'd like me to adhere to the contract? In that case, I require a hotel until you resolve all of these issues. A few years ago, I moved back into the city which I was a university student at. As I was now a young professional and had experienced significant issues with housemates in the past, non-payment of bills, having to do all the cleaning, I decided I would rent a small flat from a reputable agency which specifically catered for young professionals, such as myself. I went and viewed the property, which was quite messy and needed to have a few things addressed, i.e. the vinyl flooring in the kitchen was ripped, one of the drawers in the freezer was broken. But seeing as tenants were still living in the property and the agency assured me that that would be between tenants, the landlord would clean the property and resolve small issues prior to moving in, I happily signed a contract and wrote a chèque for the deposit and first month of rent. Yes, I know that's not how you pronounce it. 2 months later, I moved into the property and was welcomed with the following issues. Note, I just happened to stumble upon the list I made at the time while clearing out an old hard drive a few days ago. General. The entire property had not been cleaned. Fire door wouldn't close, breach of fire regulations. The previous tenants had left much of their belongings behind, namely clothes and bedding. General waste was present in all rooms. Bins had not even been emptied. Batteries had been removed from all of the fire and smoke alarms, which by law they were meant to be hardwired in rented properties. Half of the light bulbs had been removed from the property. Hallway, main supply and circuit breaker ripped from wall. Incredibly dangerous. The carpet was soiled. In the bedroom, slats on the bed were broken, so it would not have been able to sleep on it. Mattress was torn and ripped. Vinyl floor was ripped up. Window was jammed closed. Bathroom. Fecal matter on light switch. Mirror broken. Toilet had not been cleaned and still had fecal stains in the bowl. Shower door broken off hinges, and vinyl floor torn up. Then, lastly, we've got the kitchen/living room. Washing machines broken, all drawers and fridge freezer absent or broken beyond repair, gas cooker missing, burner caps, and all pan rails, therefore unusable. 2 cupboard doors are hanging off, vinyl floor is ripped up in here too, and the curtain pole is ripped down. It was very clear that 2 things had occurred here, the first being that the previous tenants had done a bit of a number on the property, that they had not respected the property and left quite a lot of damage in their wake. They didn't even have the decency to empty the place of their contents and at bare minimum take the rubbish out before leaving. The second issue, however, is that the landlord evidently had not made any significant attempt to bring the property back into a habitable state prior to me moving in. Being the reasonable guy that I was, I called the landlord and asked if he could resolve these issues immediately. Primarily, as the property was genuinely in a dangerous and non-inhabitable state, I didn't want to be a dick about it. However, the bare minimum, the flat should be safe to inhabit. The landlord dismissed all my complaints and stated that his wife, he was on a business trip to Dubai, had inspected and cleaned the property a few days before and all was fine. A blatant lie. I told him that I was extremely unhappy with the situation, and he told me to adhere to the contract which I had signed. He subsequently put the phone down, and the sympathy I had for the landlord evaporated in that very moment. He was happy for me to live in a dangerous property. So I went through the contract line by line and found 2 key pieces of information. If a property is deemed to be in breach of fire regulations and/or is deemed uninhabitable by a suitable representative, it is the responsibility of the landlord to resolve such issues immediately. If the landlord cannot resolve such issues immediately, it's the responsibility of the landlord to provide alternative accommodations to the tenant until the property is returned to a habitable state. Fortunately, a close member of my family at the time was a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Within the hour, I had a formal letter stating that the property was uninhabitable and dangerous. I had this emailed to the landlord, address helpfully listed on the contract, and within 10 minutes I had a call from him arranging emergency accommodations at a local hotel until he returned from his business trip 3 days later. On his return, he drove directly to the property from the airport and returned the for my deposit. No, that's not how it's pronounced. And first month's rent to me. He asked me to move out, which I gladly did, and unbeknownst to him, a copy of the letter had been sent by my family member to the housing ombudsman and the local authority. The last thing I heard is that this bloke ended up being investigated, heavily fined, and had to sell the house. TLDR, landlord rents me a dangerous property and tells me to adhere to the contract. I adhere to the contract and get a weekend in a hotel, all of my money back, and he's heavily fined and sells the property. After which, I go on to Reddit and use fancy words which Ryan can't always pronounce. Edit. I don't know what gold and gilded means, but thank you. Mom told me to leave, so I did. Law enforcement got involved and she lost everything. This happened when I was 15. My mom was, let's be real, she probably still is, a mentally, emotionally, and physically abusive narcissist. Some highlights are when she was teaching my twin sister and I to read at the age of 4 or so. It was around 2 a.m. and my sister was having trouble learning, so my mother's solution was to beat her with a sandal every time she got a flashcard wrong. Same thing happened when my mother had me transcribe an essay she had written to my handwriting when I was 7. Every time I started a letter from the wrong position, like starting a capital M from the bottom line, she would beat me with one of her Birkenstocks. This too happened later at night, so when I got too delirious for the exhaustion and pain, she would drag me by the neck and literally throw me into a cold shower to wake me up so we could more easily continue the waking nightmare. When I was 13, I told her I wanted to live with my dad. They were divorced and she told me that she didn't care what I did after I turned 18. I later figured out this was because the child support stopped at age 18. Anywho, fast forward to age 15. Our relationship was understandably strained. We had guests, and she liked to use guests as a way of controlling our behavior through shame. It's easier to be an angsty teenager when your grown-up friends from church aren't watching and judging everything you do. This makes it easier for her to pretend to be a firm but loving mother, all while slipping in sideways comments like velvet daggers. Well, I decided I wasn't going to subject myself to this, the whole thing, and spent the day outside in the woods nearby. We lived in the mountains at the time, so it was less than 100 from the house. When I saw our guests had left, I went to go back inside. My mother, perhaps unhappy at being denied a day-long emotional abuse routine, told me I wasn't welcome and that I should leave. My 15-year-old brain heard her words and knew that she only meant for a little while, but it also recognized that failed to specify any time frame at all. So I hiked a couple miles to a friend's house and asked if I could spend a couple days there. When my friend's dad found out why I was there, he was pissed and said that I could stay as long as I needed. I didn't go home that evening or the next, and my mom became concerned and contacted law enforcement to report me missing. This is a big deal for several reasons. We lived in the mountains on a national park, so it was a very real possibility I had been attacked by a wild animal, become injured while hiking, drowned, or been kidnapped. Nobody knew of my mother's abusive tendencies or the squalor and neglect my sister and I lived in. Most importantly, the law enforcement was the local park rangers with which she worked daily. LE immediately contacted my dad's side of the family to see if I had turned up there or contacted them. They promptly freaked the F out and came to my house with lawyers on standby. LE then hired dogs to track my scent, and then everyone freaked out because the dogs tracked me to a nearby river where my trail died because the dogs couldn't pick up any more scent. Over the next couple days, there were people going in and out of my house, rangers, lawyers, family, etc., and several noticed the overpowering scent of cleaning chemicals, but only the lawyer considered why a clean house would reek of chemicals. LE started to canvass the nearby woods and neighborhood. My friend's dad came to me and asked if there was somewhere else I could stay. He told me that he wouldn't kick me out and didn't want to have to lie to the police or let the dogs on his property. My friend and I figured we would just go camping for a week or so, but instead I looked up my dad's side of the family and called and they picked me up right away. Understandably, everyone had questions. When I told them what was happening, the lawyers, horrified, pounced. A judge issued an emergency change of custody and prevented her from gaining custody until she underwent a psych evaluation and therapy, which my mother would never allow. The Rangers, equally horrified, completely shunned my mother, and she eventually lost her job. Since she was only allowed to live on the park since she worked there, she was kicked out of her house. My friend's father and the trackers were members of the local community and churches, and they too shunned my mother. She lost her job, her house, her church, and her friends, all because she told me to leave, and I did. TLDR, my mom told me to leave the house. When I didn't come back, she calls LE and reports me missing. When Ellie gets involved, my mother's abuse and neglect came to light, and she lost her job with local LE, her house, which she had through the local LE, and her friends. Judge finally awarded custody of us kids to my dad, and she lost her child support payments too. For clarity, I'm 32 now, and this happened a while ago. It wasn't clear and didn't want to make it longer. When my dad's family got involved, they were able to reach an agreement where I would be able to leave with them for a time, but my sister stayed. I had to go back to my mom's for a short while, but the judge issued an emergency change of custody, and my sister and I went to live with our dad. My sister and I have been in therapy, and she's teaching now. Life isn't perfect, but it's better. People keep asking about the chemicals. The house was normal trashed. My mother kept an untrained dog, and the carpet was soaked with dog feces and urine. The few times we had guests, we would have to crawl around the dog's potty spot and clean it up to make the house smell good. My mom freaked out when she realized that the Rangers and CPS might come around. She did a deep clean of the house before reporting me missing, and she couldn't afford to have them realize what they were walking on. Wearing combat boots during nursing school. Back when I was in nursing school, we were supposed to wear black, non-porous, closed-toed footwear with non-skid soles for our clinical rotations that weren't Crocs. Most of my fellow female students wore classic nursing clogs like Dascos and Sanitas. I tried wearing clogs like this in the past and had rolled my ankles too many times to recall, so I decided to not go that route for shoes. I'm a military spouse, a vet myself, and have aforementioned shitty ankles, so my footwear of choice was a pair of black leather tactical combat boots, as a show of support and to make sure I always looked sharp at a clinic. My hubby always shined up and edge-dressed my boots every evening before the clinical the morning after. The boots always looked professional. They were comfy as hell, and I could bump my toes into beds without breaking a toe. And I could wear them all day without having back pain, foot pain, or rolling an ankle. The same could not be said for my classmates wearing a more traditional shoe like clogs. During the first week of my semester, I had an old-school nurse as my clinical instructor. I say old school because she believed female nurses should still be wearing crisp white uniforms with the stupid starched hats that our profession lost prestige when we transitioned into scrubs. This instructor got such a bee in her bonnet about my boots and decided that my boots were out of regulation that she threatened to take it up with the director and have me tossed from clinical, thus failing the program. There was nothing in the handbook specifically stating I couldn't wear my boots since it just stated footwear, which was black, well-maintained, non-skid, and non-porous. Check, 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 check. Furthermore, the pair of boots I wore were meant to be worn by EMTs, so they were waterproof, bloodborne pathogen-resistant, puncture-proof, oil-proof, non-skid, and had reinforced toes. They were just as expensive as Dansko clogs, and could handle lots more abuse. I knew I was in the clear, and so I decided to keep on wearing them. The day after the instructor commented on the inappropriateness of my boots, she did a uniform/shoe inspection to make sure we were appropriately attired. I, of course, was wearing my nicely polished combat boots, and she failed me for the day based on my boots, so I politely objected, stating that my boots fell within the definitions of acceptable footwear in the handbook. She literally marched me to the director's office like I was a kid caught stealing cookies, and demanded I get tossed for the boots, failure to follow program rules, and disrespect because I objected to her failing me. The program director, upon close reading of the program regs, determined there was nothing that was wrong with the boots. They adhered to the standards set forth by the program and that they were honestly safer than most of the shoes that the other students were wearing because they were waterproof, puncture-proof, non-skid, and had reinforced toes. She rescinded my fail and allowed me back in clinical. After that, I heard not a peep about my boots from any of the faculty the rest of the program. Fast forward to graduation. I had been wearing my combat boots since I started and had no intention of stopping, especially since many of the vets that I cared for during clinical always reacted positively to them. Our nursing pinning ceremony, the event where we would receive our nursing school pins and are officially recognized as nurses, has an all-white dress code. White uniforms, starched white hats, white closed-toed footwear. The word footwear is key to the dress code, did not state shoes specifically, and I knew this. Same bitchy old bat nurse sees me in the hall and makes it a point to tell me I'll have to go get some real white nursing shoes to wear for pinning, since I obviously can't wear my black combat boots, and we needed to have white footwear. I politely smiled, nodded, and said that I'd have white footwear and went on my merry way. And then wore the all-white Doc Marten combat boots my infantryman husband bought me as a graduation gift to pinning. The instructor stopped me as the ceremony and complimented me on actually getting nursing shoes, at which point I pulled up the leg of my white scrubs and showed her my boots. The look on her face was priceless. TLDR, nursing instructor tries to fail me for wearing combat boots, nursing director okays it, I wear black combat boots the whole program, and the same instructor tells me to wear white nursing shoes for the pinning ceremony, and I wear white combat boots instead. So this post kinda blew up, and a lot of people are asking what kind of boots I wear. I wear ATAC 2.0 8-inch Defenders by 5.11 point. You can get them directly from 5.11 or at Gall's. Thank you all for the love. And with that, it's all the time we have for today's r/MaliciousCompliance. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host of Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you guys in the next video.